Welcome to the Iconic Scholar Podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Kessler, co-founder of Scholarnetics 360. Get ready to journey beyond textbooks and learn from healthcare's brightest minds. Each episode is packed with insights and wisdom from industry leaders, uncovering the lessons and experiences that shape their careers. Join us to unlock the secrets to your successful career and discover the innovations shaping healthcare's future. Remember, while we're here to educate and inspire, we are not offering medical advice, just fun, educational, and authentic conversations. Okay, let's begin. Welcome to the pilot episode of the Iconic Scholar. This is an exciting day, and we're lucky to have one of the founders of Scholarnetics 360, Dr. Eder Garavito, on the call with us, and I'm grateful for him to be here. How are you?
Hey, Andrea, I am good, and thank you for having me here today.
Yeah, well, we have a lot to talk about. I have some really great questions to ask you that I think I want to really dive deep into your brain and learn a little bit more about you. But um, I have to give a little shout out to Eder because he's really the great mind behind Scholarnetics 360 and pulled everything together. And we're so excited. How are things going with the development of the beta process? Can you give us a quick background of where things are moving in that direction?
Appreciate the shout out. I think one of the most important initial things was that I found an amazing team to work with and just great people that really kind of share the same passion. But you're right. I mean, it's February and we are weeks away, or about a month. I can't even count at this point from our beta launch, right? From where we're going to finally offer our services for Scholarnetics to users and have them test it and be able to use what we've developed so that they can give us more feedback and we can continue to develop based on the feedback they give us. So where we are right now, we just are finishing our marketing website. Our developers are finishing that up so that we are not just relying on a website that I built myself on WordPress. And we'll share that with our users and subscribers really soon. And then after that, we're just going to be calling everybody to sign up for this beta testing for many reasons. One, because we're excited, and two, because we'll be offering, as we'll probably talk about here in a little bit, a lot of perks and benefits to being one of our initial adopters and assisting us with continuing to develop the service itself so that we can get an idea of what works and what doesn't work, right? We have, I don't know, probably about 10 different people working on this project right now, but ultimately, the people who are going to be using it are the most important stakeholders. We need to understand what they want because out of these 10 brilliant minds we have, we're developing this based on what we think everybody wants, right? So the beta phase, the private beta testing is going to be super exciting and it's going to be an amazing opportunity for our users to use everything for a free or a one like really really reduced price just so that they can get an idea of how it works and I think those who choose to come join us, it's important that they understand they're not only going to be our beta testers and our initial adopters, they're literally going to be helping us push this project through to the finish line, based on their feedback and their ideas of what they want, what they like, what they don't like.
It's exciting. We need definitely to get the message out there because SN360 is going to change the future of healthcare. It really is. And we hope as many people who want to see things progress will join us in this innovative process that you brought to life. We're excited. So please join scholarnetics.com and sign up. Join our mailing list to make sure that you're part of that process and can be part of moving healthcare forward. We appreciate it.
Yeah, any support would be appreciated, big or small. And right now, there's no cost, no commitment by anybody. So please do visit the website, sign up for our beta testing group, our newsletter, everything. We don't spam. Disclaimer: me, actually write the newsletters right now, so it's not a bot or somebody paid. So we're actually doing all this work to get the message out to you all.
It is exciting, and I hope more people, especially who are listening to this, will go to the website and sign up. But Eder, I wanted to ask a question. Can you, so you work at Duke Medical Center, correct?
Yeah, PRN, yes.
Yeah. But you've been there for how many years?
Almost 11, I think, coming up something like that.
11 years. Wow. Have you worked anywhere else in your time as a PT?
I have not. As I reflect back on those 11 years, I've learned a tremendous amount from a large institution, a teaching hospital. But I do believe that in some sense, I probably sort of held myself back from even improving my clinical skills and education a little bit further by leaving my comfort zone, aka Duke, right, and going somewhere else as well. But we can't change the past and don't know what that would have shown today. But yes, I've been there for 11 years and I still do PRN work and I still enjoy it quite a bit.
Well, I started also at a teaching hospital in Pittsburgh, and I have to say I'm so grateful for having that foundation. It was incredibly intense. And I don't know if you knew this, but I worked with heart and lung transplants as well. And you have your cardiovascular pulmonary, right?
I've known you for how many years and you're just telling me this?
Yeah. So I was complete acute care. And I'm so grateful for that foundation and the intense environment and all the experiences I had there. And then it really set me up, I think, for my future, the direction I chose to go. But I will say that moving to a rural area after living in a city and practicing in a city, I was amazed at how little I could specialize in a rural community because you really have to treat anyone and everyone and be a jack of all trades. So I guess my first question is, in your experiences at Duke, did you have somebody who pushed you out of your comfort zone? Was there somebody who was like, come on, Eder, you can practice here or try this and maybe like neuro trauma or something?
In short, no, right? But was I pushed innately because of the volume and the types of patients that I saw every single day, right? Surgeons get creative and you're like, what is this? So you have to figure it out. You have conversations with the medical team, all those sorts of things. But was there anybody that individually sort of pushed me beyond my comfort zones? No, it was really myself. And as you know, now that I'm learning your secrets about acute care, some hospitals have teams, right? And they have like the neuro team, the ortho team. Some hospitals don't have team and they rotate. Um, a blessing for me really was that I fell into a team that I absolutely loved, and I loved my teammates, and I loved the patients that I saw, and I was able to focus on that, like hyper focus. So, in a nutshell, I'm really, really good with a very specific population of patients, right? Once you put me outside of that, I do struggle, and I struggle even today after more than 10 years of clinical practice because my focus was so narrow. Um, in the defense of that, there aren't many PTs that practice in acute care these days, and there aren't many PTs that practice with cardiac and lung patients. So we're making a difference. But I guess the question is, are we harming our own progress? Are we harming our own education? And is the grass greener somewhere else? I don't know. I really don't.
It's a great point. When I moved from Pittsburgh to this rural community where I live now, and started working at the hospital, remember they sent me a wound care patient, and it was interesting because my experience where I worked in Pittsburgh, nursing did wound care, PT did not, and I remember saying to them, "I don't do wound care. I don't even know where to start." And in some ways, that was uncomfortable for me to admit because here I am. And in that situation, I was director of rehab. But here I am saying, I have
Hmm.
no idea how to do that.
But you learned to it in PT school, right?
We did, but that was how many years? And I didn't know what to do. So I remember contacting a PT in another nearby town. I mean, it's still like 45-minute drive, and saying, hey, I heard you do wound care. Would you be willing to come and teach me? Or, the hospital, they had agreed to pay her for an 8-hour class. But and it worked out that another PT had a little bit of wound care experience, and she actually wanted to go in that direction. So we kind of divided and conquered, if you will. But really, I think finding somebody and also admitting that you aren't skilled in an area where you are expected to be skilled. It was uncomfortable for me to do that. I have to fully admit that.
And it can be a personality thing, right? Some people are not comfortable admitting their weaknesses. I've learned to do that, and I've learned that it's actually more powerful to do so. And I learned to admit my weaknesses in a clinical setting because, admittedly, in the early stages of my career, I can still remember many things that I did that I probably shouldn't have done. I fortunately never injured a patient drastically, but I did things that were shady, right? Because I just did not want to admit that I wasn't comfortable with things. But I think there's two facets to that, right? It can be a personality thing. Somebody's just grown up with that sort of mentality where they have to always be strong. They can't admit their weaknesses. And it could just be a social thing, ethnic thing, how they were brought up. But ultimately, I mean, what do you agree or disagree that, like, I mean, healthcare providers in general, that's sort of like the message that we receive in school when we're getting educated, and that's the message that our clinical instructors and preceptors really deliver to us, that just do your best, be your best, and pretty much like don't make mistakes. And if you make a mistake, heck, right? Talk about healthcare education, physical therapy, for example, somebody's doing a practical examination. Ooh, right? They forget some yellow slippery socks. Fail. You're done. What? So that what is that going to do? It develops a student, either an eventual practitioner that's not going to be comfortable admitting mistakes. And they're going to push the limits and they're going to eventually hurt somebody or be severely disappointed on their progress in how they're progressing their knowledge and how they're treating patients, and their outcomes might not be as good. It's wild. So I think a good start would be the source and start talking about mistakes. We as educators like should tell our students all the mistakes we made, and not so that in a lecture thing, but look, these are the mistakes I made, and I'm telling you this because I don't have anybody that I can go to besides my wife that I trust, and I can say I made these mistakes, and they're going to pat me on the back and be like, "Dude, it's okay." My students will listen, and they'll learn from the mistakes that we're real people, and like these mistakes were made because we didn't have support, because we were sort of taught to not admit our weaknesses. We're taught to leave the patient's room and sort of like take a deep breath before we go in there and try again.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you learn? How do you get better? Well, and I guess that leads into something I heard the other day on a podcast that I was listening to. My poor husband was also listening to it because I insisted that we listen to it in the car. And it was a physical therapist. And the physical therapist said, we play by the rules. We always were rule followers. And my husband sat there and he was like, that's what's wrong with you. And he's right.
Well, look, I want to agree with that, but
But
you,
but
you
we are.
sure.
We're rule followers. Like we are, it goes back to what you just said about school. We're raised, so to speak, we're taught to
Hmm.
not make mistakes, know everything. And this is the way everything should function and follow this exact process, right? And that's how you get the A. That's how you do well. That's how you're deemed competent. But my question to you is, do you think that playing by the rules is what will make us great, make us better, and progress physical therapy or any aspect of healthcare by playing by the current rules?
I think you can probably think of many instances when you were a child and you lied to your parents about something you did because you were scared of the repercussions, right? Like I can tell them about this lie because I know it's going to be okay, but I can't tell them about that lie because, crap's going to hit the fan. It's the same concept here. So if we have students in our educational programs, PT, MD, PA, what have you, and we have to sort of find a balance between how much stress we put in their psychomotor evaluations, but if we place students in a situation where the only message we're communicating to them is if you do X, you fail. Let's go with a stereotypical PT one. You don't put a gait belt on, you fail. Like, why is a student going to fail a practical exam when they did not put a gait belt on a completely 100% healthy partner? Well, they fail. Maybe they fail out of the program, or maybe they fail the class. Maybe they get a remediation. But what's going to happen after that? Let's say they're now in their clinical rotations or they're in real life. And let's say that it happens in real life and they're practicing and they don't have a gait belt on their patient and the patient falls and injures themselves and it was obvious neglect. They're not going to admit to that mistake because we were taught not to make that mistake and to follow the rules. If you do things wrong, you're not going to be successful. You're going to fail. You're not going to be good at X, Y, and Z. Whereas, I can't speak for everybody, but let's take that example of they don't put a gait belt on a real patient, patient falls and they injure themselves. Unless it was just something extraordinarily drastic, that PT might just be put on like a week leave while they do an investigation and they'll slap their hands and come back. But as long as they admit to their mistake, they're able to reflect on what happened. They're able to state how they're going to change their practice. They're able to do X, Y, and Z. Like they're not going to go to prison for life, right? But it seems that way. So, yeah. Is rule following going to change? Is the rule following what we need to do? No. I think what we need to do is have established rules, but at the same time understand both sides of the spectrum of said rule. Okay, if you go this way, this is really bad. If you go this way, you might get away with it, but what happens if you don't, right? And so that way, people and students and even practitioners start understanding really what's good and what's bad beyond if I do this, I'm going to lose my job. And then if I lose my job, I'll lose all my finances. If I lose my finances, my wife will divorce me. Like there's so many things going through our heads. So there are a lot of rules we have to follow that are ethical rules. Sure, absolutely. There are financial rules, billing, 100%. There's not a lot of wiggle room. I think instead of teaching perhaps rules, as you mentioned, following the rules, let's just teach several ways of how things can be done successfully, safely, and so that every individual can sort of choose their path, but we ensure that the path they choose is a safe one, is a good one, is a path that is going to help a patient. It's going to help them learn.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's even another set of rules. They're the unspoken rules within a culture that we work. Example, I worked with a therapist, amazing therapist, right? 20 years out of school, I was a new grad. I really admired the way that this therapist practiced. However, this therapist was very rigid in their approach. And I was really learning clinically from them. But then as I started to grow on my own and I moved into orthopedics and looking at Maitland and McKenzie and these other aspects of treatment. And it was interesting because I reached a point where my patients were actually getting better quicker with these new approaches. And I think that created a little bit of a rift between myself and this therapist because I was no longer practicing under, their approach to patient care. So in some ways, there's also those unspoken rules, if you will, within our own culture. And I think that can also inhibit patient progression or innovation in our own field, in our own clinical environments, and can constrict the direction we move.
Oh, absolutely. And take that individual you just described, who shall remain unnamed. Don't even know who they are. I'll tell you how I would have reacted to that situation. And I'm not perfect. I'm not saying I'm perfect. This is just my way. I'm in that situation and I'm teaching you and I've taught you everything I know and you're a great student, but then you go and you do your own thing and you learn how to do your own things. And you're working in a similar environment as the one that I work in, the one that I taught you, but your patient outcomes are so much superior to mine. I have two options. I can say, I can just let my ego get into me and saying like, no, I'm better. I've been practicing for longer. I taught her, or I can just be like, look, like she's a sensei now. Show me, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing that's making your patients improve better? And that just doesn't happen because there are so many egos out there. Again, it's personalities, it's fear of failure, and probably a ginormous different list. And vulnerability in our field is just doesn't exist. And we feel like we always have to be strong, right? We can even assume that that individual who was very rigid, who taught you, probably had some sort of innate jealousy of your outcomes, anger potentially, and now they go home and they're emotionally exhausted from all this anger, whatever, jealousy, and patients aren't improving. Who are they going to take it out on? They're going to take it out on their family. They're not going to be there for their family. I mean, there's so many layers to this. Essentially, I think the message I'm trying to deliver is there's absolutely nothing wrong with being vulnerable and admitting mistakes. And sometimes there's nothing wrong with saying like, look, you were my student, but now you know more than I do. Teach me.
Yeah, I think that mentorship piece, clinical mentorship, goes both ways, right? There's, I think there's always the goal for anybody to improve, but it should always be the goal of the mentor for their mentee to improve and be the best that they can be.
Absolutely. And then there's that facet of, okay, let's say that it's a perfect mentor-mentee relationship. What happens when the mentee now knows more than the mentor, right? We tend to hold on to those individuals because of pride. We tend to hold on to them because I quote unquote made you. When in reality, like if they know more, and I'm speaking for myself, I'm like, tell me what you learned. Like this is free stuff. Like talk to me now. Like you are now the sensei. Like I'm here to listen. And I think it just not admitting isn't the right word. Just recognizing when the mentee now has outgrown us is super important, and providing them with other resources, another network, another mentor, or yeah, just resources that they can continue their education because they left us behind. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, leaving behind isn't necessarily a bad thing. It could be, point of our careers, or we're just busy with other things. They might be single with no children, like they have more energy and gas, but heck, like instead of just keeping them stagnant or for progressing because we're selfishly trying to keep them where we are and turn them into who we are and not letting them progress. Like I would ride that train left and right. Like, look, whenever you finish that course, call me and teach me because I want to know all about that. That's saving me 500 some dollars. But how often do we see that happen? How often have you seen that happen?
Yeah, I really think it's the reason for leadership training to come to play in every industry, right? But healthcare, because healthcare, let's be honest, I have been in intense situations where, you know, you have health professionals pitted against health professionals, and there's this argument, that argument, and this is your area and my area. But really, patient care is all of our responsibility.
There are customers.
Absolutely. And honestly, we took an oath to take care of people. I had to cover the hospital last weekend, and it was a last minute um, coverage for a colleague of mine who had a personal matter. And did I want to get up early Saturday and go into the hospital? And so when I walked in to the hospital, I knew my attitude was, oh, I could probably be at home in bed right now. But instead, I walked in and I said, you know what? This is a privilege for me to be here today. And I'm grateful to serve. So, and serve my patients, because if I don't go in there, I'm an occupational therapist and a physical therapist. And
She's a
so, yeah.
unicorn.
So
She's
the
brilliant.
beauty of occupational therapy is there's a portion of our training where you have to evaluate therapeutic use of self, meaning you as the practitioner, need to be in a good place and need to take care of yourself. If you're not well, then you're not going to treat well. And so that's kind of been ingrained in me. And I think that's the approach I take every time I treat a patient or I come in contact with a patient. I know when I'm not in the right frame of mind, and I know that impacts my patient outcomes. So yeah, I think that leadership has jumped into healthcare because the evidence is out there. I say this, but the research says it more than I do. And it's something that I hear from physicians that they're working on to change that culture within their profession. But we really need to look at it from an interprofessional standpoint too, I think.
Yeah, and not only interprofessional standpoint. I mean, just from a standpoint of each individual profession. Part of why I left full-time care was because I had reached a point of burnout, recognized that I was burnt out until I realized I am not doing my patients any favors. I'm just like, I'm not treating them the way they deserve to be treated. So why am I still here? And I started looking for research opportunities and teaching opportunities, and that's how I started teaching full time. But I don't mean to devalue anybody with this statement, but our patients are our customers. Let's say that you walk into a Subway, right? Again, I don't want to devalue Subway workers in any way, but you walk into a Subway with your family, you're all happy, you're going to get a great sandwich, and the Subway workers are arguing. And it's just ugly. You have a choice, right? You can leave. Oh, let's go somewhere else. This is awkward. Or I think I'm going to stay here and maybe my sandwich won't be spit on or won't be good. It'll be good. Patients who are vulnerable, they're in gowns, they have all types of catheters and lines and they can't just leave when we behave like that. When we have physicians going at each other's throats or PTs just going at each other's throats or leadership not supporting us or we just talking about how our department doesn't support us. So I agree, we need to start changing that, right? And we've been talking about changing that forever. But here's my idea. And unfortunately, my idea takes time. It takes a lot of time. But we focus so much on leadership sometimes. Like we need to change leadership. Like administration is not supporting us. Our leadership team doesn't have, they don't have any doctors. It's just all politicians and whatevers. Cool. But there's a different generation that's coming, right? We have 3,000 nurses graduating this year. We have 50,000 PTs graduating this year. We have 100,000 physicians. You do the math, right? And there's going to be turnover. So instead of focusing on let's change leadership, let's get better quote unquote leaders up there, how about we start really when they're babies? And by babies, of course, it's just generalizable because some are in their second career, but as students, let's teach them what proper leadership looks like. Let's teach them how to lead. Let's teach them how to start fixing these issues. And then eventually, once they get to leadership and administrative positions, they'll hopefully start changing the system. So it'll take a while, but we maybe stop focusing so much on, look, my boss is not the best, or my team lead's not the best, or the leadership team, they make $100 million more than I do. Like that's not, you can complain what you want to complain. That's not going to change. Let's just start in the bottom. Let's start with our babies and let's just brainwash them when they're in school to be amazing people and amazing practitioners, clinicians. And once they get to those leadership positions and push those others out, we'll start seeing the change. So that's my take on it.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's happening.
It is.
I am so impressed with the practitioners coming out in all areas. I mean, I just worked with an amazing attendee at the hospital, and I was just so grateful for the conversation I had with her. It was very open-minded, and she was interested in what I had to say. That doesn't always happen, but I will also say that I was on LinkedIn and I caught up with some of the students that I've worked with over the past 10 years and seeing how they've grown and developed in their own areas. It's amazing to me. I mean, Eder, like a lot of them have their own business. I saw one student, she's vice president of a company. I'm like, go for it, right? And I love the non-clinical stuff too, right? We can move in other directions. It's exciting to see the younger generation being so innovative. Not necessarily that they're playing against the rules or breaking rules, but they're making rules. They're doing their own thing, but they're expanding our profession, and they're really the direction we're going. It's really exciting.
Absolutely. I mean, I know several individuals, physical therapists, right, that work in staffing. And you think about it, well, why are they working in staffing? And they spend $200,000 on a PT degree. I'm like, okay, first, maybe their loans are paid off. Maybe they paid off their loans. Maybe they got forgiven. We're not talking political crap. But even so, like, why not have somebody who knows the jobs and how the jobs are done or how the job is done, staff those jobs? Brilliant, right? So these non-clinical roles are not spoken about. We have CAPTE standards. We have standards from the MPTE. We don't have enough time or bandwidth or even flexibility to really say, look, nudge, right? Nudge an elbow. Just because you love ortho and you want to be a sports PT, you could also do this on the side and make some extra money and help the profession grow. It's just not talked about. Non-clinical stuff is just brilliant. And I'm so glad that PTs are finally starting to get seen in these non-clinical roles. Maybe one of these days we'll make it into CMS. Who knows? Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really exciting. Well, I want to thank you for the great, great conversation. I learned a lot about you today.
And likewise, look at you, cardiopulmonary acute care.
You had no idea, did
No,
you?
and I've known you for how many years now?
Well, that was like 20 years ago. So
Still,
I know I'm outdated compared to you.
No. I'm outdated compared to the ones that are practicing right now, right? And just in case y'all didn't hear earlier, we have a PT and OT here too. She's a unicorn, so.
Eder, I practiced when LVADs were a big blue machine and you had to get an engineer.
Oh, the Centromags? Yeah.
Huge. So
Seen
anyway,
those.
Well, thank you again. This was a great conversation. I appreciate you and all that you bring to the really the floor of healthcare, right? The direction we're going, foundations, and we're building everything as we go. And thank you for bringing me on the journey. I appreciate it.
Oh gosh, I wouldn't want anybody else on the journey, but our hope is just that the conversation you and I just had can be accessible to anybody, anywhere, with anybody. And hopefully that's how our system will work. So, yeah, just check it out. And no, thanks for chatting me. I'm sure we'll have a lot more conversations coming up.
Thank you for joining us on the Iconic Scholar podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to continue the conversation, don't forget to connect with us on social media as @ScholarNetics360. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And remember, always consult with a healthcare professional for medical advice. Until next time.